In 1498, a Florentine government official named Niccolò Machiavelli watched his political mentor get hanged, then dismembered, then burned in the public square. He was 30 years old. He took notes, not because he was cruel, because he understood something most people never will, that reality does not care what you wish were true, only what you're willing to see. What he recorded over the next 20 years became the most dangerous manual for the human mind ever written. Not dangerous because it teaches manipulation. Dangerous because it teaches clarity. And clarity, applied correctly, is the most threatening thing a person can possess. This is not a history lesson, not a philosophy lecture. What you're about to see is a specific cognitive upgrade. 5 brain hacks Machiavelli built from watching empires collapse that will permanently change how you think, how you read people, and how you make decisions. Most people scrolled past this. That is already a data point about the separation. First, let's look at the problem with your brain. Think about the last bad decision you made. Not a small one, a real one. The job you stayed in too long. The person you kept trusting after they'd already shown you exactly who they were. The opportunity you talked yourself out of with reasons that felt intelligent at the time. Now ask yourself, did you actually not see the warning signs? Or did you see them and choose to look away? Because here is the truth Machiavelli spent his entire career documenting. Your brain does not want to see clearly. It wants to feel comfortable. These two things are almost never the same. The human brain didn't evolve to process reality accurately. It evolved to survive. And survival comfort and accuracy are in direct conflict the moment reality becomes threatening. This is not stupidity. Machiavelli never called his subjects stupid. He watched popes make catastrophic miscalculations. Generals lose battles they should have won. The most educated men in 15th century Europe systematically destroy themselves, not through ignorance, but through the deliberate refusal to see what was in front of them. Intelligence does not protect you from this. In some cases, it accelerates the problem. Smart people construct better prisons for themselves, more convincing reasons to believe what they already want to believe. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler, he wrote, is to look at the men he has around him. Not flattery, a diagnostic. What a person tolerates reveals what they are willing to see, and what they are willing to see determines everything that follows. Brain hack 1, the Ruthless Audit, seeing what is, not what you want. How many times have you known something was wrong and convinced yourself it wasn't? The job slowly killing your ambition. You called it stability. The friendship where you were always giving and they were always taking. You called it loyalty. The plan that hadn't moved in 18 months. You called it patience. Your brain was doing exactly what it was designed to do, manufacturing a comfortable story to protect you from an uncomfortable truth. Machiavelli had a name for the gap this creates. He called it the distance between virtue and fortuna. Fortuna is everything outside your control. Virtue, not virtue in the moral sense, something colder, was the capacity to see your actual situation, stripped of the story wrapped around it, and act on what is real. His observation: most people hand their lives to fortuna, not because they lack intelligence, but because they have never developed the virtue to look directly at what is true. They are capable of seeing, they choose not to. Here is how this is operating in your life right now. You are in a situation, a job, a relationship, a project, that has not meaningfully changed in over a year. Every few months, you tell yourself it's about to. The reasons feel solid, but the situation remains identical. That is not fortuna. That is you running a story instead of an audit. The ruthless audit is one question, not why is this working? That only finds evidence for what you already believe. The question is, what would have to be true for this to be failing? Force your brain to build the case against itself, not pessimism, accuracy. Julius Caesar was betrayed by 23 senators. The question history skips is not why they conspired. That's obvious. The question is why Caesar didn't see it. He was 56. He had won every military campaign he'd ever entered. He had just been declared dictator perpetuo, ruler for life. His brain had stopped running the audit entirely. The signals were everywhere. A soothsayer's warning, his wife's nightmare. A note pressed into his hand at the theater doors, naming the conspirators, naming the plan, naming the date, that he never opened. He walked past all of it, because the story, invincible, beloved, permanent, was too well constructed to question. The ruthless audit is the discipline of reading the note before you walk into the theater. Most people don't. That's not a defense. That's the mechanism of how they get taken apart. Brain hack 2. The information hierarchy. Your inputs are building your mind. Listen carefully. Whatever you consume consistently, you become capable of producing. This is not motivation. This is neurology. The brain builds the pathways that get used and prunes the ones that don't. Feed it pre-digested outrage, and it becomes a machine optimized for reaction, not analysis. Feed it other people's conclusions, and it loses the capacity to reach its own. Think about your actual information diet over the last 30 days, not what you wish it had been. How much of what you consumed told you what to think, rather than showing you the raw material and letting you think? How much was designed to produce an emotional response, anger, fear, tribal loyalty, rather than genuine insight? How much made you feel informed while making you less capable of navigating the real world? Machiavelli studied the Romans, obsessively. He read Livy's 35 surviving volumes not as history, but as a case study archive, a database of how power actually behaves under pressure across centuries. He was looking for the mechanism beneath the events. Why did Rome outlast Carthage? Why did the same strategic failures appear in Athens, in Sparta, in Florence, separated by hundreds of years? He was building a map of reality from the highest quality signal he could access, and what that process revealed about information. One who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. He wrote that about politics. It describes your feed precisely. Your information diet is constructing a map. You navigate by it every day, in relationships, in decisions, in the way you read people and situations. The question is whether it is a map of how things actually work or a map of what various parties need you to believe. A wrong map in unfamiliar territory is more dangerous than no map. It produces confident movement in the wrong direction. 3 filters. Apply them before you accept anything. Who benefits from this being believed? Every piece of information has an origin with an interest. Identify the interest before you accept the conclusion. What is the actual track record? Credentials and confidence are not track records. Who has been consistently right about outcomes over years? That person has earned authority. Everyone else has earned skepticism. What does this source have no incentive to tell you? The admission that costs the source something is the most valuable data point in any argument. Find it. Weight it heavily. Machiavelli didn't study the gossip of Florence. He studied the Romans. Stop consuming what makes you feel something. Start consuming what makes you see something. The difference between those two inputs, compounded over 5 years, is not cosmetic. Brain hack 3. Strategic patience. Timing is a weapon. Here's a scenario you have lived. You see something wrong. A bad strategy. A flawed decision. A problem no one is naming. You have the answer. You know you're right. So you say something immediately, in the room, in front of everyone, and nothing changes. Or it backfires. The person you challenged digs in. Now they're not evaluating your idea. They're defending their position. You were right about the problem. You were wrong about the moment. The outcome is identical to being wrong about everything. This is what Machiavelli meant by occasione, the right moment. His argument was not that good ideas win. Good ideas deployed at the wrong moment lose, and the gap between those two outcomes is entirely a function of timing. Strategic patience is not passive. Do not mistake it for waiting. It is active preparation held until conditions are exact. Cesare Borgia was conspired against by a group of lords at Magione. Any reactive ruler would have moved immediately. Borgia offered reconciliation, invited them to dinner, spent 11 months giving every visible signal of restored goodwill. Then, when all 4 principal conspirators were in a single location with no exit, he arrested and executed them within hours. The window was 30 minutes. The preparation was nearly a year. Bring this back. How many moves have you made before your position was ready? The message sent before you had leverage, the confrontation before you had evidence, the launch before you had an audience. You weren't wrong about what needed to happen. You were wrong about when. And premature action doesn't just fail. It reveals your hand, depletes your resources, and closes the window you needed. Before any significant move, 3 questions. Is this the right action? Is this the right moment? What has to be true for both answers to be yes simultaneously? If you can't answer the third, you are not ready. And moving before you're ready costs more than not moving at all. Brain hack 4. Second-order thinking. Seeing 3 moves ahead. Wait. Stay with this one. Most people think in first order. Action, immediate consequence. You stay late at work consistently. You get praised once. Then it becomes expected. Then it becomes the baseline. Then you are penalized the first time you don't. You lend money to someone who doesn't repay it. You resent them, but do it again next time because the first-order calculation is the same. You take the job that pays more but drains you completely. 6 months later, you are exhausted and cannot understand why. Every significant mistake in your life, traced back honestly, was a first-order decision. You saw the immediate result. You stopped there. Second-order thinking asks, and then what? Machiavelli wrote something most readers skip. A prince ought to have no other aim or thought, nor select anything else for his study, than war and its rules and discipline. People read militarism. They miss the structure entirely. He was not telling rulers to think about war. He was telling them to think about systems under maximum pressure. War is the stress test that reveals the true architecture of anything. Supply chains, loyalties, leadership, vulnerabilities. The leader who understands how a system behaves when everything is at stake understands how it behaves normally. War is the limiting case. The limiting case tells you everything the comfortable case conceals. The second-order thinker runs the limiting case on every decision. After any plan or position, ask, what does the most capable, most motivated opponent of this plan do in response? Not a weak opponent. The strongest one. Then what do you do? Then what do they do? 3 levels minimum. This is not pessimism. Chess grandmasters model the opposition at maximum strength, not because they doubt their position, but because a plan that only survives weak resistance is not a plan. It's a hope dressed as strategy. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. Pure lion gets trapped by what it didn't see. Pure fox maps everything, moves nothing. The second-order thinker is the fox doing its work, so the lion can move without hesitation. Most people skip the fox entirely. Then they are surprised by the trap. Brain hack 5. Reputation. As architecture, the mind others cannot penetrate. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. The most quoted line Machiavelli ever wrote, almost universally misread. People read emotion into it, intimidation as management, fear as a tool. He was not describing an emotion. He was describing a structural property. Love, in his analysis, is conditional. It is based on what you provide. The moment you stop providing, it recalibrates. It moves to whoever is providing now. It is volatile by design. You cannot build on a foundation you do not control. Fear, not terror, but the respect that comes from the certainty of consequence, is structural. It does not depend on conditions. It persists because it is built on demonstrated consistency, not continuous provision. Think about the people you genuinely respect. Not the ones you like, the ones you respect. They share one property. They do what they say. Every time. Without exception. When they draw a line, the line holds. When they say no, they do not then explain it for 15 minutes to manage your reaction. They have made their position legible through repetition, not through argument. Now ask whether you are that to others, not whether you intend to be. Whether the pattern of your behavior, observed from outside, produces that conclusion. Because here is what Machiavelli recorded without apology. The ones who prioritized being liked over being consistent were the ones who got tested, then exploited, then discarded. People test the edges of what is permitted. That is not malice. That is how social systems calibrate power. If the edges move when tested, the testing escalates. If the edges hold, it stops. Your reputation is being constructed right now with every interaction. Every time you hold to what you said. Every time you don't over-explain. Every time you let consequences land instead of absorbing them to keep the peace. These compound. Over years, they produce a version of you that others cannot easily decode, pressure, or predict. Not aggression, not performance, coherence. When you audit clearly, consume with discipline, act with precision, and think in second and third order, your behavior becomes something people operating at lower resolution cannot read. You stop reacting. You stop justifying yourself to people who are not entitled to justification. You stop adjusting your position because someone applied discomfort. That is not a personality type. That is a structural product of the upgrade. It cannot be faked. It can only be built. And most people will not build it. Not because they can't, because they won't sit in the discomfort long enough for it to become architecture. Machiavelli died in 1527, exiled from politics, ignored by the Medici rulers he once advised. Living on a small farm outside Florence, no title, no office, no visible power. By surface measurement, irrelevant. Every evening, he removed his work clothes, put on formal court dress, and sat alone with the Roman and Greek writers. He described entering their company, questioning them, extracting their reasoning. No audience, no performance, no applause. Just the discipline of sharpening a mind that circumstance could no longer touch. Everything external had been stripped. The structure remained. That is the end point of these 5 hacks. Not influence, not optics. Structure. The ruthless audit eliminates self-deception. The information hierarchy eliminates distortion. Strategic patience eliminates premature exposure. Second-order thinking eliminates surprise. Coherent architecture eliminates leverage against you. Installed together, they produce something most people never build. A mind that does not collapse under pressure because it was constructed with pressure in mind. Most people will understand this conceptually. They will recognize themselves in at least one failure pattern. They will feel the accuracy of it, and then they will return to the same inputs, the same reactions, the same first-order decisions compounding quietly over years. Not because they disagree, because clarity demands restructuring. And restructuring is uncomfortable. The separation does not happen in dramatic moments. It happens in small refusals. The refusal to run the audit, the refusal to delay action, the refusal to model the second consequence, the refusal to hold a boundary when it costs something. Those refusals compound. So does the alternative. There is no announcement when the divergence becomes irreversible, no ceremony, no signal flare, just one trajectory bending slightly upward while another drifts down. Machiavelli understood something most never do. Power is not dominance over others. It is insulation from illusion. A person who sees clearly cannot be steered easily. A person who cannot be steered easily cannot be used predictably. And a person who cannot be used predictably alters the structure of every room they enter. Most will not build that. Some will. The divergence is already underway. Those building differently will recognize where to continue.